The problem we have in this country is because we have suffering from mental slavery. Over 300 years ago, our parents sold our brothers and sisters into slavery. 300 years later, we are not different. We are still selling ourselves into slavery. There is no originality in this country. This is the root of the problem we have. Those days, the price for the slaves were trinkets, beads, gunpowder, gin, thank you very much, and so on. The price today is foreign aids. The price today is political influence. The problem we have is not of our own making. And unless we address those issues, our collusion with the colonial masters is going to cause us more problem. If we look all around, look at the ceiling, there is nothing that is new, nothing indigenous in this hall. The country itself is not indigenous. Even the coup, we are blaming the military. Even the coups that we have is not of our own making. I believe there is the author of one of the books I have read in this conference who stated that the idea of a coup was first suggested in one of the military conferences they attended in America. I will go straight to read, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, what the respected Alhaji Shehu Shagari has put in his book. And I ask every member here to get that book, because I know most members here have the book written by Clinton, but they have not bought the book written by Haji Shehu Shagari. And I'm going to quote what he has written. Quote, I was particularly struck by a conversation I had with a Greek professor attached to an international agency in Geneva. He told me his opinion of why West Europeans were supporting the rebellion against Nigeria. It was, he said, common among Westerners to sympathize with the underdog in any dispute, which in this case happens to be the Eastern Igbo. But what was even more important to the West was that Nigeria was a potential rival power in Africa, a force which had to be checked before it becomes a threat to Western European interests on the continent. The Biafran challenge, accordingly, provided a suitable opportunity to trim Nigeria's growing wings. He said that according to certain estimates, Nigeria was sitting on a keg of oil, which, given a suitable condition, would make it so rich in just 10 years, that is by 1978, that Nigeria would not require any aid from Europe. Indeed, Nigeria would be in a position to assist other African countries, especially the poorer ones, and thus undermine an important basis on which European influence was exercised over them. I underline that. He did not therefore think that Europe would stand idly by and watch Nigeria become to Africa what the United Nations had become to Western Europe. The rebel enclave, on the other hand, could be encouraged to become a rich but small and manageable African country, which would still be dependent on the West, just as some small oil-rich Arab countries have been. Finally, he assured me that whatever happened in the future, the West would never allow Nigeria to develop to a position where its wealth and power would threaten West European interests in Africa.
Now we come to those international institutions, IMF, World Bank, WTO. We always think evil creatures, horrible. It's economic warfare. The rich declare war on the poor. It happens everywhere. It happens in a country. The rich control the government. Of course they do. You really believe you have democracy? Come on. Grow up. This is not about people living in democratic systems. What we have is the rich control. The rich set up these institutions explicitly to control the poor countries. And they don't give them much room for maneuver. Which incidentally, when the IMF starts talking of poverty alleviation, you should also understand that there's another game there also starting to play, which I'm going to come back to later. But what do these institutions do? What does the IMF do? What is structural adjustment about? It's about making sure countries keep producing what we want them to produce. We make sure they have recurrent balance of payments problems. You notice these countries never get out of balance of payments problems. You notice that? Whereas countries that never took IMF support are always out of balance of payments problems. But the countries that are continuously getting advice and support by the IMF, they're always in balance of payments problems. Why? Because that's the way we keep our stranglehold on them. And that's what we have done. We have done, the IMF and the World Bank. And they've also done something very, very important. And that is they have destroyed the self-sufficiency of these countries. Colonization started it. Okay? One of the most important things is we destroy food self-sufficiency. Okay? And the World Bank continued it. They forced most countries to eliminate all food subsidies and food support. Okay? Because once you don't produce your own food, I increase my control over you. How do we know this? Well, very funny thing happened some years ago. Not so funny, actually. It involved starvation of a large number of people in Malawi. Okay? Many of you could remember this because it was really tragic. But the Malawian finance minister, who was under terrible threat at the time, suddenly broke ranks and he said, well, you know why we had this famine? Because one of the conditions of the loan given by the World Bank was we destroyed all our grain surplus stocks. Why? Because remember, we want you dependent. 1970s, the US Senate, the US Congress said, we will not allow Latin America to produce their own food. We will start a strategy involving the IMF and the World Bank to destroy food self-sufficiency of Latin America. Then they will indeed be our true backyard. And that's exactly what they've done. Look at all the Latin American countries. Look at them. They used to be food self-sufficient, but they're no longer food self-sufficient. Now here comes the kicker. We have now in the WTO something called the Agreement on Agriculture. You know what that Agreement on Agriculture states? It says, if you don't have any subsidies, you're not allowed to put these subsidies on food. But if you have subsidies and income support for food production, you can keep them. Who has all the subsidies and income support? US, Europe. The largest budgets in the world for supporting their farmers are Europe and US. But the World Bank and IMF have destroyed all those subsidies. You see, all those subsidies have been destroyed. And now we're telling these countries, you don't have subsidy, tough luck, you know. You see, we're keeping them dependent. We're keeping them on a string. We have lots of examples in the WTO to really stop Africa industrializing. This is the crucial thing. We cannot allow them to produce manufacturers. It's not difficult. Trust me, it's not difficult. We need nationalist governments. We need them committed to industrialization, and it won't take them a decade to move out from where they are. This is the fundamental point. It's not difficult. But this next round of the WTO is designed to block that. It's to make sure, especially sub-Saharan African countries, do not escape. You see, we teach, in many cases, garbage. And it doesn't hurt anyone, a lot of this garbage. You know, it's just blah, 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 blah. And we don't know what we have learned, but anyway, we were there at the university and you got a certificate and you go away and you feel you've learned something. But sometimes we teach very destructive things. And no more important than when we're teaching people from developing countries. Okay, and one of those very damaging and destructive things is the doctrine of comparative advantage. It's a lie from beginning to end. It's utter crap. It has been decimated many times, but we keep it in every curriculum. Why? Because it tells sub-Saharan African countries that their destiny is to produce raw materials, you see. And if you produce raw materials, you get rich just like we are in the West. You see, this is the game we're playing, and just for you to be totally confused, we normally build models with it, mathematical models, so you really have no idea what we're talking about. But it seems all very scientific. Then we have the modern version of this is because it's all a failure, we know it's a failure, we now have a new generation of economists saying, it's only a failure because you're all corrupt in your countries. We call that new institutional economics. You've all probably learnt it all, but you didn't know why they invented it. It was invented to tell you the same thing. You should keep producing raw materials. Now, don't be as corrupt as you were before. Nobody ever told you that aid was designed to actually start the corruption process in the first place. Okay, and we need corruption to make sure you're doing all these things. But now we blame the victim. You're poor because it's your fault, basically. And you're poor, stupid, and corrupt, basically. This is the message that we're giving people. We also have many theoretical justifications, but I'm going to say something controversial to end. And that is, there are also what I call more enlightened approaches, but which are also potentially destructive for sub-Saharan African development. And this is where I come back to the IMF and the World Bank. You see, now they're all into poverty alleviation. They want you to concentrate on redistributing income, and it's something nice. You're young people, you're socially conscious, you're aware. You don't like all this injustice. So you gravitate towards what we call pro-poor strategies. But actually, I'm sorry to tell you, that is not what Africa needs. Africa needs aggressive industrialization. When China was a communist country and we had equal distribution, who feared China? Who took them seriously? They weren't even the size of the Netherlands. But today, I can't open an internet site, I can't open a magazine, I can't open a newspaper without China, 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 China. And we know what has built China. It's not socialism or communism, it's capitalism, guys. It's manufacturing, it's production. This is what creates employment, this is what created jobs. I'm not pro-capitalist, but this is the reality, and unfortunately, we're now going to get caught with the good cop, bad cop. The good cop is now IMF saying, oh, you must concentrate on poverty reduction and income redistribution, as long as we can take you away from industrialization. This is the crucial thing.